Hello there, dreamer, and welcome. Tonight you are invited on a quiet journey, a journey into stillness, into peace, and into the dreams that await you. As you settle in, let the soft rhythm of your breath be your guide. Each inhale brings in calm. Each exhale lets go of the day. Together, we'll drift into a world where time slows down and all that matters is this peaceful moment. Before we begin, if this sleep journey helps you find peace and rest tonight, I kindly invite you to support the channel by liking, subscribing, or leaving a comment below. Your support helps this little cozy corner of the internet grow and continue creating soothing content just like this. Now, let's settle in. Find a comfortable position, lying down or resting back, allowing your body to sink a little deeper with every breath. Gently close your eyes and take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. And softly exhale through your mouth. Again, a deep breath in. And let it go. With each breath, allow the day to fade away. There's nothing to do now, nowhere to be. You've done enough. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Soften the muscles around your eyes. Imagine a warm blanket of calm gently being draped over you. A comforting presence that says, you are safe, you are held, and you can let go now. Let your thoughts float like clouds across a quiet sky. No need to chase them, just notice and return to your breath. In and out. Allow your body to grow heavier, your mind lighter. Let sleep come naturally, gently in its own time. You are at peace. You are calm. The tea shop at the end of the rainbow. I had been walking for what felt like an eternity. My boots caked in the dust of endless roads, my heart heavy with the weight of untold stories. The world stretched out before me, an endless expanse of hills and valleys, rivers and forests, but none of it felt like home. I was a traveler, a nomad of the soul, seeking something I could not name. Perhaps it was peace. Perhaps it was belonging. Or perhaps it was just a place to rest for a while. It was then that I saw it. A rainbow, impossibly bright, arched across the sky, its colors so vivid they seemed to hum with life. I had seen rainbows before, of course, but this one was different. It touched the earth in the distance, its end disappearing into the misty folds of a valley below. I had heard the old tales, the whispers of fortune awaiting those who found the rainbow's end. But I was no fool chasing gold. I simply had nowhere else to be. With a sigh, I adjusted my pack and followed the light. The descent into the valley was slow, the mist curling around me like the breath of some great sleeping beast. The air grew cooler, scented with something unfamiliar yet comforting. The closer I came to the rainbow's end, the clearer my path became, until at last the mist parted to reveal something I had not expected. A tea shop. It stood nestled between two great oaks, their roots intertwining like the hands of old lovers. The shop was small, its wooden frame dark with age, yet warm lantern light glowed from its windows, casting golden halos onto the mist. A sign above the door read simply, "The Tea Wizard." I hesitated. A place such as this did not belong here, in the quiet folds of an untouched valley. And yet the scent of tea and spice curled through the air, beckoning me forward. My feet, tired and aching, carried me over the threshold before my mind could decide otherwise. Inside, the shop was a haven of warmth and comfort. Shelves lined with jars of tea leaves and spices stretched from floor to ceiling, the air thick with their mingling fragrances. Wooden tables sat in cozy corners, each adorned with a small candle flickering gently. Behind the counter, a man, no, not a man, something more, stood watching me with knowing eyes. He was tall, his silver hair falling past his shoulders like strands of moonlight. His robes, a deep shade of green, shimmered in the candlelight as if woven with threads of morning dew. But it was his eyes that held me in place, pale and endless, like the sky before a storm. "Welcome," he said, his voice a melody I did not know I had been waiting to hear. "You have traveled far." I swallowed, my throat dry. Yes, I suppose I have." He nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "Sit," he said, motioning to a table near the window. "You look like a man in need of tea." Something inside me uncoiled at his words, and I found myself obeying without question. The chair was sturdy, the table smooth beneath my fingertips. Outside, the mist continued to swirl, but in here, I was safe. The tea wizard moved with quiet grace, selecting a jar from the shelves, measuring leaves with careful precision. As the water boiled, he turned to me once more. "You followed the rainbow," he said. It was not a question. I nodded. "It led me here. As it was meant to." I frowned. Do you put it there?" He chuckled, a low and rich sound. "No, my dear traveler, rainbows are not mine to summon. They are simply pathways, guiding those who need to find their way." "And what is this place?" I asked. "Who are you?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he poured the tea, the liquid a deep amber, fragrant and inviting. He placed the cup before me, and I wrapped my hands around its warmth. "I am the tea wizard," he said at last, a small smile touching his lips. "And this is a sanctuary for weary souls." I took a sip of the tea, and something inside me shifted. The flavor was unlike anything I had ever tasted, floral yet rich, with an undercurrent of something ancient and powerful. The warmth spread through me, easing aches I had long since grown used to. I exhaled slowly. "This is remarkable." The tea wizard inclined his head. "Tea is more than leaves and water, Elias." I blinked. "How do you know my name?" His smile deepened. "I know many things." Silence settled between us, comfortable and unhurried. Outside, the rainbow had begun to fade, its colors dissolving into the sky, but I no longer felt the need to chase it. For the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was meant to be. "Tell me, Elias," the tea wizard said, his voice gentle. "What is it you seek?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. I did not know the answer, or perhaps I had known all along but had never dared to speak it aloud. I don't know," I admitted, staring into the depths of my tea. The tea wizard nodded as if this too he had expected. "Then stay," he said. "Drink your tea, rest, and when you are ready the road will still be waiting." A part of me wanted to protest, to say I could not stay, that I had no home here, but the words never came. Instead, I took another sip of tea and let its warmth fill the spaces within me that had been empty for too long. For the first time in years, I was not just a traveler. I was not lost. I was home. I took the cup in my hands, the warmth of it spreading through my fingers like the embrace of an old friend. The scent of the tea was unlike anything I had ever encountered, earthy, yet with a whisper of something floral, something ancient. As I brought the cup to my lips, the steam curled around my face, and the first sip sent a calmness through me that felt as though it had been waiting in my bones for years. The tea wizard watched me with knowing eyes, his robe shimmering as though woven from twilight itself. He sat opposite me in his small cluttered tea shop, where jars of dried leaves and vials of amber-hued liquids lined the shelves. The room was bathed in soft golden light, the kind that made time feel suspended, as if the outside world had momentarily forgotten about me. "You carry a storm within you, Elias," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "But even the wildest tempests can be soothed." I swallowed hard, not just from the tea, but from the truth in his words. He spoke as if he had peered straight into my soul and seen the weight I carried. "I don't even know where to begin," I admitted, setting the cup down carefully. "Everything feels heavy, like I'm walking through a dream I can't wake up from." The tea wizard nodded, stroking his beard in contemplation. Dreams and reality often blur when one's heart is troubled. "But tell me, Elias, what is it you seek?" The question settled into my chest like a stone dropped into a still pond. I had spent so long running from my past, from my regrets, that I had never stopped to ask myself what I truly wanted. Peace, I said at last, the word escaping me in a breath. I just want peace. The old man smiled, his eyes twinkling with something between wisdom and amusement. Ah, peace, a noble thing to seek. But peace is not found, Elias. It is brewed like tea. He reached for a small wooden box and lifted the lid, revealing an assortment of dried leaves and petals. With careful, practiced hands, he selected a few and dropped them into a pot of steaming water. The scent that arose was different this time, deeper, more robust. Each leaf carries a story, just as you do, he continued. Some are bitter, some are sweet. The art of tea is in the balance. You must learn to embrace each note, to let them steep together. Only then will you find what you seek. I watched as the liquid darkened, the leaves unfurling like tiny secrets revealing themselves to the world. The tea wizard poured me another cup, and as I took another sip, something stirred inside me. It was subtle but undeniable. A shift, a loosening of the knot that had been tangled within me for so long. So, what do I do now? I asked, my voice quieter than before. He leaned back in his chair, the wooden frame creaking. You listen, he said, to the tea, to the world, to yourself. And when the time comes, you will know where to go. I stared down at my cup, watching the tiny ripples on the surface of the tea. For the first time in a long while, the weight on my shoulders felt just a little lighter. The steam curled from the surface of the cup, a slow dance of warmth and memory. I wrapped my fingers around the porcelain, feeling the weight of something far greater than the sum of its parts. The tea wizard sat across from me, watching with a knowing gaze, his gnarled hands folded neatly on the table. There was no rush, no demand, only the quiet expectation that I would take my first sip when I was ready. I wasn't sure I ever would be. But the aroma drifted upward, coaxing something deep within me, teasing the edges of a recollection I couldn't quite grasp. The scent was sweet yet earthy, like the first rains soaking into sun-baked ground. And then, without conscious thought, I lifted the cup to my lips. The taste was warmth itself, a golden thread that wove through my senses, through time. It was the taste of sunlight, of open skies and wind in my hair. My breath caught in my throat as the world around me shifted. Suddenly, I was no longer sitting in the tea wizard's dimly lit cottage. I was outside, surrounded by endless fields of golden wheat. The wind hummed as it rushed past my ears, and the sky above was endless, impossibly blue. My feet were bare, the earth firm beneath them as I ran, laughter bubbling up from deep inside me. It was not my voice alone, it was hers too, my mother's laughter. I turned, and there she was, young, vibrant, with sunlight caught in her hair. She chased after me, her arms outstretched, her face alight with joy. My heart ached at the sight, at the purity of this moment I had somehow lost. I was a child again, free, unburdened by the weight of years, by the things that came after. "Elias!" she called, and I turned, grinning, my arms pumping as I ran faster. But she caught me, of course she did, pulling me into her embrace. I could feel the rapid beat of my heart against her chest, the way her laughter shook through both of us. "You're getting too fast for me," she teased, ruffling my hair. I giggled, squirming in her hold, but she held me tighter for just a moment longer. "Promise me something?" I nodded, breathless. "Anything." "Never stop running toward joy," she whispered, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "No matter what." A gust of wind swept through the fields, carrying with it the scent of earth and home, of warmth and safety. And then, just as suddenly, the world shifted again. The fields blurred, the golden light fading into the dim candlelit glow of the tea wizard's cottage. The porcelain cup was still warm in my hands, but I could feel the lingering imprint of my mother's arms around me, the ghost of her laughter ringing in my ears. I sucked in a shaky breath, my vision blurred. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the cup back on the wooden table. The tea wizard studied me, his eyes filled with something that might have been understanding, or perhaps approval. He did not ask what I had seen. He didn't need to. "It is a powerful thing," he murmured, his voice a whisper against the stillness. "Memory and magic." I swallowed hard, nodding. "I had forgotten," I admitted, my voice rough. "I had forgotten how it felt to be whole," he supplied. The words settled deep in my chest. I nodded again. He gestured toward the cup. "Tea, Elias, is more than leaves and water. It is history, it is spirit, it is truth. The first cup will always show you what was lost." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his words, the truth of them sinking in. When I opened them again, the tea wizard was watching me with that same patient expression. "And the second?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "The second will show you what is yet to come." The steam curled upward, forming ephemeral patterns in the dim light. The tea wizard's shop had a way of turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, and as I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic cup, I knew this was no ordinary tea. The first sip was smooth, rich, carrying with it a familiar sweetness that I couldn't quite place. It was like the whisper of a memory, just out of reach. Then it hit me. Leora. The name blossomed in my mind, as if plucked from the pages of my past. Leora, my childhood friend, the one person who had known me better than anyone. I hadn't thought of her in years, but suddenly I could hear her laugh, see her bright green eyes flashing with mischief. The scent of the tea carried me further, deeper into the memory. We were 10 years old, sitting under the great willow tree by the river. The afternoon sun dappled through the leaves, and the air smelled of damp earth and wildflowers. Leora had a piece of twine, twisting it around her fingers as she spoke. "Promise me, Elias," she had said, her voice full of the solemnity only children can muster. "Promise me that no matter what happens, we'll find each other again." I had laughed then, not because I didn't take her seriously, but because the thought of being apart seemed impossible. We had been inseparable since we were 5. Of course I promise, no matter what. She had grinned, looping the twine around my wrist like a makeshift bracelet. Then it settled. No matter how far apart we are, we'll always find our way back. But life had a way of unraveling promises. I moved away at 13, and the letters we exchanged dwindled until they stopped altogether. Time eroded the sharpness of memory, smoothing the edges until she became nothing more than a lingering ache in the quiet moments. And yet, here she was, resurrected by the simple act of drinking tea. "This tea," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "It tastes like something you've lost." The tea wizard's voice was gentle, knowing. His violet eyes shimmered with something unreadable. I nodded. "Leora." He smiled, not surprised. "Memory is a powerful thing, Elias. Some connections are never truly broken." The weight of his words settled deep in my chest. Could she remember too? Did she ever think about that promise beneath the willow tree? My heart pounded at the thought. Maybe it was foolish, but something in me refused to let go of the possibility. "Is she still out there?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Is there a way to find her?" The tea wizard studied me for a long moment before setting down his own cup. "There is always a way. But the question is, are you ready to walk that path?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." His smile deepened, and with a flick of his wrist he produced another teacup, this one with an iridescent shimmer to its surface. "Then drink." The tea was different this time. A subtle floral note, something lighter, airier. The moment it touched my tongue, the world around me shifted. The shop blurred, sounds muffled, and suddenly I was standing somewhere else entirely. A marketplace, bustling with color and movement. The scent of baked bread and jasmine filled the air. My heart thundered in my chest as I turned, searching, knowing what I would find. And there she was, Leora. Her hair was shorter now, curling just below her chin. But those green eyes, unchanged, still carrying the spark of mischief I remembered. She was standing at a stall, examining a row of delicate silver bracelets, completely unaware of me. For a moment I simply watched, afraid that if I moved she would vanish like the wisp of a dream. But then, as if sensing my presence, she looked up. Her eyes met mine. Recognition dawned slowly, widening her gaze, parting her lips. "Elias?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "It's me, Leora." A beat of silence, then a sudden, breathless laugh. "It worked!" I blinked. "What?" She reached for her wrist, pulling at something. A thin, faded piece of twine, frayed but still intact. The same twine she had tied around my wrist all those years ago. "I never took it off," she said softly. "I hoped, I believed." My own wrist felt suddenly bare, and I glanced down, remembering how mine had been lost somewhere along the way. But it didn't matter now. She was here. We had found each other. A lump formed in my throat. I can't believe this. How are you? A story for another time, she interrupted, grinning. But you found me, Elias, just like we promised. The marketplace faded as the tea's magic released me, and I found myself back in the tea wizard's shop, my pulse racing. The shop was quiet again, the weight of the moment settling over me like a thick blanket. The tea wizard watched me with a satisfied nod. Some paths must be walked, Elias. Others, they find their own way. I looked down at my empty cup, my heart still pounding. Leora was out there, alive, remembering. And now nothing in the world could stop me from finding her again. I held my breath as I gazed at the shimmering tea leaves before me, each one pulsing softly with an inner light. The tea wizard's shop was unlike anything I had ever encountered, a place where the very air seemed to hum with secrets. The scent of aged herbs and spiced brews curled around me, wrapping me in warmth, yet a faint chill ran down my spine. There was something here, something more than just a shop filled with enchanted teas. A soft rustling at my feet drew my attention downward. The cat, a sleek creature with eyes like liquid amber, twitched its tail and padded silently across the wooden floor. It moved with an uncanny purpose, glancing back at me before slipping through a narrow space between two overstuffed shelves. My curiosity flared. What had it found? Glancing toward the tea wizard, who busied himself behind the counter grinding leaves with rhythmic precision, I decided to follow. The space was tight, lined with jars labeled in an elegant looping script. The cat disappeared behind a draped curtain, and as I pulled it aside, my breath hitched. A door. Not just any door. This one was different. Unlike the wooden doors of the shop, this one was built into the wall, flush and near invisible, as if the shop itself had tried to keep it hidden. The handle was smooth, dark brass, cool beneath my fingers. The cat sat beside it, tail curling around its paws, watching me expectantly. "What have you found, little one?" I murmured, more to myself than the feline. I glanced back, half expecting the tea wizard to call me away, but he remained occupied. I hesitated only a moment longer before turning the handle. The door swung inward with a sigh, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward. My heart pounded in my chest. I stepped inside, and the cat followed, slipping past me like a shadow. The air was different here, older, thick with a scent I couldn't quite place. Dim globes of light flickered to life along the walls as I descended, casting long shadows that danced like whispering specters. At the bottom, the space opened into a vast chamber lined with shelves far older than those above. Glass vials, dried herbs, and ancient tomes filled every available surface. A large table sat in the center, covered in parchment with inked diagrams and notes I couldn't decipher. The walls bore etchings, symbols curling and twisting into patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I stepped forward, drawn to the table. My fingers brushed across one of the parchments, and the ink glowed faintly under my touch. The cat leapt onto the table and pawed at a small ornate box. I reached for it, feeling the delicate carvings beneath my fingertips. The latch gave way easily, revealing a set of tea leaves, darker, richer than any I had seen before, shimmering not just with light, but with something deeper, something alive. A voice, deep, smooth, echoed behind me. "You've found the heart of the shop, Elias." I spun to find the tea wizard standing at the base of the stairs, his expression unreadable, though his eyes held a quiet knowing. The cat leapt from the table and wound around his legs before trotting back to my side, as if awaiting my next move. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The tea wizard stepped forward, his robes rustling like dry leaves. "This," he said, gesturing to the chamber, "is where true magic is brewed." I swallowed hard. "You knew I'd find it." He smiled, the corners of his mouth twitching. "Of course, the shop chooses its secrets wisely, and it seems it has chosen to share this one with you." I looked back at the shimmering leaves in the box. My pulse quickened. There was more to this than just enchanted tea. I could feel it. I had stepped through a doorway not just of wood and brass, but of knowledge and mystery, and I was ready to see where it led. I held the cup in both hands, the ceramic warm against my fingers, steam curling up in soft tendrils, carrying a scent that was at once familiar and haunting. The tea wizard had said nothing as he placed the cup before me, only watching with those knowing eyes, waiting. The first sip was a whisper of memory, the second a ghostly caress, and the third, the third. My chest tightened as if a fist had clenched around my heart. A deep ache, raw and unhealed, spread through me like ink in water. I gasped, clutching at the table's edge as the world around me shimmered. The dim glow of the tea wizard's shop, the wooden shelves lined with jars of exotic blends, the worn rugs beneath my feet, all of it blurred, folded, and shifted. Then she was there. Celeste. The room was gone, replaced by the golden hues of a late autumn afternoon. Leaves rustled around us, caught in the slow dance of the wind. Her silhouette stood bathed in the soft glow of the sun, and my breath faltered. Time had preserved her cruelly well, as if no years had passed since the last moment I had seen her. The same deep-set eyes, the curve of her lips, the way she stood with arms folded, the wind playing in her raven hair. "Elias," she said, my name a melody I had nearly forgotten. I swallowed, my throat dry despite the lingering taste of the tea. "Celeste." Her eyes held mine, searching, questioning. "Why are you here?" I had no answer. Was this truly happening? A trick of the tea? A vision of my longing? But my heart thundered in my chest, and the ache within me was real. "I never truly left," I murmured, the words slipping past my lips unbidden. "Not in here." I pressed a hand to my chest, but it did nothing to still the tremors within me. Her expression softened, and for the first time in years I saw something in her gaze I had not dared hope for. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even regret. She stepped forward, and I saw the flicker of hesitation in her step. "After all this time, you still think of me?" I gave a hollow laugh. Every time the wind carries the scent of rain, every time I hear a song we once loved, every time I drink tea, Celeste. The words hung between us, fragile, dangerous. She bit her lip, her gaze dropping to the ground. "Elias, we made our choices. We let time and distance take us." I never let go. The confession was raw, unexpected even to myself, but I had never spoken truer words. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "You should have." Pain lanced through me. Should I? When every day since I've wondered what if? What if I had fought harder? What if I had stayed? She looked up sharply. "And what if I had gone with you? What if I had left everything behind?" Then maybe we wouldn't be standing here full of regrets. Silence stretched between us, heavy and bittersweet. The wind whispered through the trees, stirring the fallen leaves. Celeste turned away, her fingers curling around her sleeves. "We can't rewrite the past, Elias, but we can decide what to do with the present." She stilled. A part of me feared she would vanish, that the vision would fade before I could speak the words I had held inside me for too long. I stepped forward, reaching for her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath my fingers. "Tell me you don't still wonder. Tell me you don't still feel it." Her breath hitched. She looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing the boy I once was, the man I had become. Then she exhaled a shuddering breath and closed her eyes. "It doesn't change anything. It changes everything." She pulled away, and the loss of her touch was like a blade to my ribs. She turned, and I saw it, the war waging within her, the longing, the doubt, the love that had never truly left. I took a step forward. "Celeste, don't let this be another memory we regret." She faced me again, and in her eyes I saw a decision teetering on the edge. Then the world blurred once more. The scent of autumn leaves faded, replaced by the rich aroma of tea. The wooden shelves of the tea wizard's shop came back into view. The worn rugs beneath my feet steadied. My heart still thundered, my breath still shook, and the ache in my chest had not lessened. The tea wizard watched me, his expression unreadable. I exhaled, setting the empty cup down with unsteady hands. "What was that?" "Tea remembers," he said simply, "and so do you." I closed my eyes. The ghost of Celeste's touch lingered on my fingers, the echo of her voice still warm in my ears. She had been real, if only for a moment, and I had been given a choice, one I had yet to make. I held the delicate porcelain cup between my fingers, the steam curling upwards in ghostly wisps, carrying with it a scent both foreign and familiar. The tea wizard watched me with eyes like embers buried deep within a bed of ash, their glow revealing something I could not yet understand. "Drink, Elias," he urged, his voice a whisper carried on the gentle flicker of candlelight. A hesitation gripped me. What if this vision showed me a future I could never reach? Would it be a gift or a torment? Yet even as doubt tangled in my chest, I lifted the cup to my lips and took a cautious sip. The taste was unlike anything I had ever known. Floral, with the sharpness of citrus and the soothing caress of honey. Warmth unfurled in my veins like the first touch of dawn, and suddenly the world around me began to blur. My senses reeled, and for a moment I was weightless. Then with a shudder, I found myself somewhere new. The air smelled of fresh rain and blooming jasmine. Soft laughter echoed in the distance, and I turned toward the sound, my heart pounding. Before me was a sight I had long since deemed impossible. I stood in a lush garden, surrounded by faces radiant with joy. There was a house, modest yet filled with life, its windows aglow with golden light. My hands were steady, my shoulders unburdened. I felt whole in a way I had not in years. A woman approached, her eyes filled with warmth. Her fingers brushed mine in a touch so real I nearly wept. "Elias," she said, her voice carrying the melody of home. Could this be real? I reached out, grasping at the dream, at the possibility of it. But as my fingers brushed against the edges of this perfect world, the vision wavered, slipping through my grasp like grains of sand. "No!" The cry tore from my throat as I jolted back to the dimly lit room of the tea wizard. The cup in my hands was empty, the steam long gone. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my chest ached with the loss of something I had only just touched. The wizard regarded me solemnly, his hands folded before him. "You have seen what could be, Elias," he murmured. "Now you must ask yourself, will you chase it or let it remain a dream?" I swallowed hard, the aftertaste of the tea lingering on my tongue. The future had never felt more real, nor more distant. Could I reach for it? Could I make it mine? And if I did, what would it cost? I sat across from the tea wizard, my hands wrapped around the warm porcelain cup he had given me. The scent of jasmine and something more elusive, something ancient, curled into the air between us. The wizard, old yet sharp-eyed, traced the rim of his own cup with a long finger. His eyes shimmered like the surface of a lake catching the last light of day. "You have asked about my past, Elias," he said, his voice smooth as though aged like fine tea. "It is not a tale I tell lightly, nor one I often share. But tonight the leaves whisper that you should hear it." I nodded, settling deeper into my chair as he began. "Once I was not the tea wizard you see before you. I was merely a man, wandering with neither direction nor peace. My name then was Aldrich." The name felt weighty in the air, as if it held within it the weight of centuries. I was a scholar, drawn to the mysteries of the arcane, but my heart belonged to a woman named Lyria. A wistful smile crossed his lips, the kind that carried both warmth and sorrow. She was light where I was shadow, laughter where I was silence. It was she who taught me that magic was not just in the runes and relics, but in the simple act of kindness. A shared cup of tea on a cold night, a whispered secret beneath the stars. His fingers tightened slightly around his cup before he continued. But fate is rarely kind to those who believe they have found happiness. The war came. Magic itself became a weapon, and I was called to wield it. A silence fell over us, heavy and thick as fog. Lyria begged me not to go, but I was young, foolish. I believed I could protect what I loved by standing on the battlefield. I was wrong. His voice cracked barely above a whisper. The battle lasted 3 days. When I returned, our village was nothing but embers. The house we built together had crumbled, and Lyria, his breath hitched. She was gone. A cold hand gripped my heart. I had never heard such raw grief woven into words before. I searched for her, he said, for years. Every spell, every scrap of knowledge I gathered was in pursuit of undoing what had been done. But death does not return what it has taken. The wizard exhaled, slow and deliberate, as if steadying himself against the weight of memory. I was lost, Elias, truly lost, until I stumbled into a small village, weary and near collapse. And there an old woman invited me into her home. She offered me nothing more than a cup of tea and a place by the fire. His eyes lifted to meet mine, and I saw the embers of something resolute. That moment changed me. For the first time in years I felt warmth, not just in my hands, but in my soul. That single act of kindness, as simple as it was, anchored me back to the world. And so I chose to dedicate my life to creating a place where others might find what I had lost. A sanctuary, a moment of warmth in a world often too cruel. I swallowed, the weight of his story settling deep within me. That is why this place exists, Elias. Not for power, not for magic's sake, but for those who are lost, so they might find their way again, even if only for a moment. The tea in my hands had gone cold, but I did not mind. My heart was warm. The moment the warm tea slid down my throat, a fire kindled in my chest. It spread rapidly, not as a burn, but as a sensation of undeniable clarity. The wavering doubts that had coiled themselves around my thoughts unraveled in an instant. My mind, fogged with indecision just moments ago, was now razor sharp. I knew where Leora was. More importantly, I knew I had to find her now. The tea wizard observed me with an amused yet knowing glint in his eyes. Ah, you feel it now, don't you? The courage, the clarity. This is the tea of second chances. It does not merely gift you bravery. It reminds you of what your soul already knows. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over the delicate porcelain cup on the wooden table before me. My fingers trembled, but not with fear. No, fear had abandoned me. It was urgency that set my limbs in motion. "She's near the Whispering Falls," I said, my voice resolute. "I don't know how I know, but I do." The tea wizard nodded approvingly. "Then go, Elias. Time is as fluid as the tea we drink. Waste none of it." Without another word, I bolted from his cozy, lantern-lit shop and into the cool night air. The cobbled streets of Eldermere were quieter than usual, the moon casting elongated shadows along the buildings. My feet barely made a sound as I ran. my heartbeat keeping pace with my determination. Leora had been missing for days, and every attempt to find her had led to dead ends. But now it was as if a thread of fate had been placed into my hands, leading me directly to her. The Whispering Falls. Why had I not thought of it before? It was our place, a secret haven nestled deep within the moonshade forest. As I veered past the town's gates, the scent of damp earth and pine filled my lungs. The forest loomed ahead, its trees towering like silent sentinels. I plunged into its depths, moving swiftly along the familiar paths we had once walked together. The further I ran, the louder the distant murmurs of the falls grew, mingling with the rustling leaves and nocturnal calls of unseen creatures. Then I heard it, a voice, faint, carried by the wind, but unmistakably hers. Elias. I skidded to a stop, breathless. Leora, I called, my voice breaking through the night. A rustling from behind a dense thicket made my heart leap. I pushed through the branches, barely feeling the sting of leaves against my skin. And there she was, Leora, sitting near the water's edge, her form illuminated by the moon's glow. She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and something else, relief. Elias, you found me. I dropped to my knees beside her, grasping her hands as if she might disappear. You're safe. I thought I lost you. She shook her head, her golden hair reflecting the soft light. I never meant to be lost. I was searching for something I thought I needed, but now I see what truly matters. I studied her face, noting the exhaustion, the traces of tears dried upon her cheeks. Come back with me, I urged. We have another chance. We can set things right. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she nodded. Yes, let's go home. With her hand in mine, I helped her to her feet, feeling the magic of the tea still thrumming through my veins. The tea of second chances had led me to her, and this time I wouldn't let go. The colors in the sky above me waver, shimmering like a mirage, before dulling at the edges. The brilliant spectrum that had painted the horizon is slowly retreating, as if second-guessing its return. I stand frozen, my mind tangled in an impossible choice. The tea wizard watches me from his place beside the low wooden table, his expression unreadable beneath the shifting candlelight. His robes, the color of steeped amber, rustle as he leans forward slightly. You feel it, don't you? His voice is gentle but firm. The pull of the unknown, the whisper of a path not yet walked. I nod, swallowing hard. The tea he brewed for me was more than just a drink. It was a key, unlocking visions of places I had never been, of people I had yet to meet. Possibilities stretched before me, vibrant and enticing, but fleeting like the colors now dimming in the sky. If I go, I murmur more to myself than to him, I might never come back. The tea wizard tilts his head slightly, considering me. True, but if you stay, you may never know what lies beyond the rainbow's edge. I let out a slow breath, watching the last slivers of violet and gold dissolve into the evening. My heart pounds with indecision. My time here has been brief but profound. The tea wizard's lessons, his stories steeped in wisdom and ancient knowledge, have altered me in ways I can barely understand. To leave now means stepping into uncertainty, but to stay means turning my back on the very thing that calls to me. What would you do? I ask, knowing full well that the answer is mine to find. The tea wizard chuckles softly, reaching for his cup and taking a slow sip. That is not my question to answer, Elias. His eyes glimmer like dark pools of liquid knowledge. I have walked my paths and made my choices. This one belongs to you. I exhale, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me like a heavy cloak. If I leave, I step into a world of mystery and potential danger, but also adventure and self-discovery. If I stay, I gain certainty, knowledge, and the safety of these warm walls, and the wise mentor who has guided me thus far. I look back at the fading sky one last time, then down at the cup in my hands. The remnants of the tea have settled at the bottom, the leaves forming patterns I can't quite interpret. Perhaps they hold the answer. Perhaps I already know it. My fingers tighten around the porcelain. My decision is made. I turn to the tea wizard, my voice steady. I have to go. A knowing smile plays at his lips. He sets his cup down and rises, the fabric of his robes whispering against the wooden floor. Then you should go before the last light fades, he says. But remember, Elias, the tea only shows possibilities. It is you who shapes the path ahead. I nod, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and fear. As I step toward the door, the cool night air rushes in, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. The world beyond awaits, and with one last glance at the tea wizard's knowing eyes, I step into the unknown. The road stretched before me, a winding path of dust and stone leading back to the place I once called home. The warmth of the tea wizard's shop still lingered in my chest, a quiet ember glowing against the evening chill. The scent of spiced leaves clung to my clothes, a reminder of the parting gift he had placed in my hands, a pouch of his finest blend, meant to carry me through the long miles ahead. The sky was painted in streaks of amber and rose, the sun sinking low on the horizon. I had barely taken a dozen steps when something, a presence, stirred the air. My heart leapt. Ahead, where the path curved and dipped into a valley of wildflowers, stood a figure. Leora. She was a ghost of the past, standing still as the wind toyed with the loose strands of her hair. The golden light wrapped around her like a halo, casting long shadows on the earth beneath her feet. I stopped walking. My breath caught somewhere between surprise and something deeper, something unnamed. She had always been just beyond reach, a fleeting whisper in the wind, a dream I had spent too many nights chasing. And now here she was, real, solid, waiting. I forced my feet to move, though the weight of 1,000 unspoken words anchored me to the ground. Leora? My voice barely carried, swallowed by the vastness of the open road. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Elias. The sound of my name from her lips was a key turning in an old rusted lock. The years that had stretched between us, the nights of wondering, the echoes of words we never had the courage to say. It all pressed into that one moment. I stepped closer, hesitating at first, then striding forward as if drawn by an invisible thread. I didn't expect to see you. Her lips curved, a ghost of a smile. Nor I, you. She studied me, her gaze flickering to the pouch of tea in my hands. You've been with him. I nodded. There was no need to ask who she meant. I have. A knowing glimmer lit her eyes. And did he give you what you sought? I hesitated. Had he? The tea wizard had offered no grand revelations, no earth-shattering truths, and yet there was something within me now, a stillness, a warmth that had not been there before. I think so, I said, though I'm still figuring out what that means. Leora stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint lines of worry etched at the corners of her eyes. Elias, She stopped herself, exhaling softly, her breath a whisper against the cooling air. I waited, giving her space to find the words. I thought you wouldn't come back, she finally admitted. The weight of her words settled between us. I had left without saying goodbye, without looking back. There had been reasons, though whether they were good ones, I still wasn't sure. I wasn't sure I would. The truth was a fragile thing between us, delicate yet unyielding. Silence stretched. Somewhere in the distance, a bird trilled a lonely song. The scent of wild flowers and earth filled the air, mingling with the lingering fragrance of tea. Leora finally moved, reaching out with cautious fingers, tracing the edge of the pouch I held. Then let's walk, she murmured. You can tell me what changed. And so we walked. The road to my hometown stretched on, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't walking it alone. I never imagined I would find Leora again, or perhaps that she would find me. The city had changed in the years since we had last met, but she had not truly. Time had graced her lightly, adding only a whisper of silver to her dark hair, a softening to her gaze that was already kind. And when she saw me, I knew in an instant that the magic of the past had not faded. We sat in a small cafe, unremarkable in every way. A bell chimed as I pushed open the door, a sound lost in the hum of voices, the clatter of spoons against ceramic. The scent of roasted beans and spice curled around us, distant echoes of something far greater. You remember it too, I said, watching her as she stirred her tea. Her fingers paused just for a moment, and then she smiled. How could I forget? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The memories flooded back with such clarity that for a moment I swore I could taste the air of that place again. Warm, fragrant, alive. The Rainbow Tea Shop, I murmured, and Leora gave a small, knowing nod. It had not been a shop in the way this cafe was. There had been no sign on the door, no menu, no clear path that led you there. And yet we had both found it. Or perhaps it had found us. I told her everything. How I had stumbled upon the narrow alley where the lantern swayed without wind. How the cobblestones seemed to whisper beneath my steps. How the air itself shimmered, heavy with the scent of stories waiting to be told. And then there was the tea wizard. Leora laughed, a soft, delighted sound, and I saw in her eyes the same wonder I had felt on that long-ago evening. He told me that every cup holds a memory, she said. That once you taste it, it never truly leaves you. I nodded. I didn't believe him at first, not until the first sip. Even now, recalling it made my throat tighten, my hands tremble ever so slightly against the porcelain of my cup. It had been like drinking the very essence of a moment, the golden warmth of childhood, the crisp bite of a forgotten winter morning, the scent of jasmine carried on the wind of an unfamiliar city. The past, the future, all distilled into something impossibly tangible. "And now?" Leora asked, gesturing toward the tea before us. Ordinary, simple, the kind that could be found anywhere. I lifted it to my lips and sipped. The taste was nothing remarkable, yet something in my chest ached, as if the memory itself flavored it. "It lingers," I said, "even now." She reached across the table, her fingers warm against mine. Maybe that was the real magic all along. Not the tea, but the fact that we carry it with us. I thought of the tea wizard then, of the way his eyes had gleamed in the dim glow of his shop, of the quiet smile he had given me when I finished my cup, as if he had always known I would come to understand. The rainbow tea shop was gone now. I had searched for it more than once. The alley was just an alley, the cobblestones ordinary. No lanterns swayed in invisible breezes, and yet I could never quite shake the feeling that if I turned the right corner, at the right moment, I might find it again. Or perhaps it had only ever existed for those who needed it most. Leora and I sat in comfortable silence, the last rays of the sun slanting through the window, painting gold across the wooden table. We finished our tea, neither of us rushing to leave. The magic had found us once. In a way, it never left. And in the quiet warmth of that cafe, I knew it never would. Once upon a time, ever so many years ago, there lived a little old man and a little old woman. Very old indeed were they, for they had lived nearly 100 years. But they took neither joy nor pleasure in anything, and this because they had no children. They were now about to keep the 75th anniversary of their wedding day, known as the Diamond Wedding. But no guests were invited to share their simple feast. As they sat side by side, they went over in memory the years of their long life, and as they did so, they felt sure that it was to punish them for their sins, that God had denied them the sweet happiness of having children about them, and as they thought, their tears fell fast. At that moment, someone knocked. "Who is there?" cried the old woman, and ran to open the door. There stood a little old man leaning on a stick and white as a dove. "What do you want?" asked the old woman. "Charity," answered he. The good old woman was kind-hearted, and she cut her last loaf in two, giving one half to the beggar, who said, "I see you have been weeping, good wife, and I know the reason of your tears. But cheer up, by God's grace you shall be comforted. Though poor and childless today, tomorrow you shall have family and fortune." When the old woman heard this, she was overjoyed, and fetching her husband, they both went to the door to invite the old man in. But he was gone, and though they searched for him in every direction, they found nothing but his stick lying on the ground. For it was not a poor old beggar, but an angel of God who had knocked. Our good friends did not know this, so they picked up the stick and hurried off to find the old man, with the purpose of returning it. But it seemed as if the stick, like its master, were endowed with some marvelous power, for whenever the old man or the old woman tried to pick it up, it slipped out of their hands and rolled along the ground. Thus they followed it into a forest, and at the foot of a shrub which stood close by a stream, it disappeared. They hunted all round the shrub, thinking to find the stick there, but instead of the stick they came upon a bird's nest containing 12 eggs, and from the shape of the shells it seemed as if the young ones were ready to come forth. "Pick up the eggs," said the old man. "They will make us an omelet for our wedding feast." The old woman grumbled a little, but she took the nest and carried it home in the skirt of her gown. Fancy their astonishment when at the end of 12 hours there came out, not unfledged birdlings, but 12 pretty little boys. Then the shells broke into tiny fragments, which were changed into as many gold pieces. Thus, as had been foretold, the old man and his wife found both family and fortune. Now these 12 boys were most extraordinary children. Directly they came out of the shells, they seemed to be at least 3 months old. Such a noise did they make, crying and kicking about. The youngest of all was a very big baby with black eyes, red cheeks, and curly hair, and so lively and active that the old woman could hardly keep him in his cradle at all. In 12 hours' time the children seemed to be a year old and could walk about and eat anything. Then the old woman made up her mind that they should be baptized, and thereupon sent her husband to fetch priest and organist without delay. And the diamond wedding was celebrated at the same time as the christening. For a short time their joy was clouded over by the disappearance of the youngest boy, who was also the best looking and his parents' favorite. They had begun to weep and mourn for him as if he were lost, when suddenly he was seen to come from out of the sleeves of the priest's cassock, and was heard to speak these words: "Never fear, dear parents, your beloved son will not perish." The old woman kissed him fondly and handed him to his godfather, who presented him to the priest. So they had named him Nizhganek, that is, imperishable. The 12 boys went on growing at the rate of 6 weeks every hour, and at the end of 2 years were fine, strong young men. Nizhganek, especially, was of extraordinary size and strength. The good old people lived happily and peacefully at home while their sons worked in the fields. On one occasion the latter went plowing, and while the 11 eldest used the ordinary plow and team of oxen, Nizhganek made his own plow, and it had 12 plowshares and 12 handles, and to it were harnessed 12 team of the strongest working oxen. The others laughed at him, but he did not mind, and turned up as much ground as his 11 brothers together. Another time, when they went haymaking, and his brothers used the ordinary scythes, He carried one with 12 blades, and managed it so cleverly, in spite of the jests of his companions, that he cut as much grass as all of them together. And again, when they went to turn over the hay, Nizhgnek used a rake with 12 teeth, and so cleared 12 plots of ground with every stroke. His haycock, too, was as large as a hill in comparison with those of his brothers. Now, the day after the making of the haycocks, the old man and his wife happened to be in the fields, and they noticed that one haycock had disappeared. So, thinking wild horses had made off with it, they advised their sons to take turns in watching the place. The eldest took his turn first, but after having watched all night fell asleep towards morning, when he awoke to find another haycock missing. The second son was not more fortunate in preventing the disappearance of the hay, while the others succeeded no better. In fact, of all the 12 haycocks, there only remained the largest, Nizhganek's, and even that had been meddled with. When it was the youngest's turn to watch, he went to the village blacksmith and got him to make an iron club weighing 260 pounds. So heavy was it that the blacksmith and his assistants could hardly turn it on the anvil. In order to test it, Nizhganek whirled it round his head and threw it up in the air, and when it had nearly reached the ground he caught it on his knee, upon which it was smashed to atoms. He then ordered another weighing 480 pounds, and this the blacksmith and his men could not even move. Nizhganek had helped them to make it, and when finished, he tested it in the same manner as the first. Finding it did not break, he kept it, and had in addition a noose plaited with 12 strong ropes. Towards nightfall he went to the field, crouched down behind his haycock, crossed himself, and waited to see what would happen. At midnight there was a tremendous noise which seemed to come from the east, while in that direction appeared a bright light. Then a white mare, with 12 colts as white as herself, trotted up to the haycock and began to eat it. Nizhganek came out of his hiding place, and throwing the noose over the mare's neck, jumped on her back and struck her with his heavy club. The terrified creature gave the signal to the colts to escape, but she herself, hindered by the noose, out of breath, and wounded by the club, could not follow, but sank down on the earth, saying, "Do not choke me, Nizhganek." He marveled to hear her speak human language, and loosened the noose. When she had taken breath, she said, "Knight, if you give me my liberty, you shall never repent it. My husband, the dappled horse with golden mane, will cruelly revenge himself upon you when he knows I am your prisoner. His strength and swiftness are so great you could not escape him. In exchange for my freedom, I will give you my 12 colts, who will serve you and your brothers faithfully." On hearing their mother neigh, the colts returned and stood with bent heads before the young man, who released the mare and led them home. The brothers were delighted to see Nizhganek return with 12 beautiful white horses, and each took the one that pleased his fancy most, while the thinnest and weakest looking was left for the youngest. The old couple were happy in the thought that their son was brave as well as strong. One day it occurred to the old woman that she would like to see them all married, and to have the house merry with her daughters-in-law and their children. So she called upon her gossips and friends to talk the matter over, and finally persuaded her husband to be of the same opinion. He called his sons around him and addressed them thus: "Listen to me, my sons. In a certain country lives a celebrated witch known as Old Yaga. She is lame and travels about in an oaken trough. She supports herself on iron crutches, and when she goes abroad carefully removes all traces of her steps with a broom. This old witch has 12 beautiful daughters who have large dowries. Do your best to win them for your wives. Do not return without bringing them with you. Both parents blessed their sons, who, mounting their horses, were soon out of sight. All but Nizginik, who, left alone, went to the stable and began to shed tears. "Why do you weep?" asked his horse. "Don't you think I have good reason?" replied he. "Here I have to go a long, long way in search of a wife, and you, my friend, are so thin and weak that were I to depend upon your strength I should never be able to join my brothers." "Do not despair, Nizginek," said the horse. "Not only will you overtake your brothers, but you will leave them far behind. I am the son of the dappled horse with the golden mane, and if you will do exactly as I tell you, I shall be given the same power as he. You must kill me and bury me under a layer of earth and manure, then sow some wheat over me, and when the corn is ripe it must be gathered and some of it placed near my body." Nizginek threw his arms round his horse's neck and kissed him fondly, then led him into a yard and killed him with one blow of his club. The horse staggered a moment and then fell dead. His master covered him with a layer of manure and earth, upon which he sowed wheat, as had been directed. It was immediately watered by a gentle rain, and warmed by the heat of the sun's rays. The corn took root and ripened so quickly that on the 12th day Nizginek set to work to cut, thresh, and winnow it. So abundant was it that he was able to give 11 measures to his parents, and keeping one for himself, spread it before his horse's bones. In a very short time the horse moved his head, sniffed the air, and began to devour the wheat. As soon as it was finished he sprang up, and was so full of life that he wanted to jump over the fence in one bound. But Nizginek held him by the mane, and getting lightly on his back, said, "Halt there, my spirited steed. I do not want others to have the benefit of all the trouble I have had with you. Carry me to old Yaga's house." He was of a truth a most magnificent horse, big and strong, with eyes that flashed like lightning. He leapt up into the air as high as the clouds, and the next moment descended in the middle of a field, saying to his master, "As we have first to see old Yaga, from whom we are still a great way off, we can stop here for a short time. Take food and rest. I will do the same. Your brothers will be obliged to pass us, for we are a good way in front of them. When they come, you can go on together to visit the old witch. Remember, though it is difficult to get into her house, it is much more difficult still to get out. But if you would be perfectly safe, take from under my saddle a brush, a scarf, and a handkerchief. They will be of use in helping you to escape. For when you unroll the scarf, a river will flow between you and your enemy. If you shake the brush, it will become a thick forest, and by waving the handkerchief it will be changed into a lake. After you have been received into Yaga's house, and your brothers have stabled their horses and gone to bed, I will tell you how to act." For 12 days Nizginek and his horse rested and gained strength, and at the end of the time the 11 brothers came up. They wondered greatly to see the youngest, and said, "Where on earth did you come from? And whose horse is that?" I have come from home. The horse is the same I chose at first. We have been waiting here 12 days. Let us go on together now." Within a short time they came to a house surrounded by a high oaken paling, at the gate of which they knocked. Old Yaga peeped out through a chink in the fence and cried, "Who are you? What do you want?" "We are 12 brothers come to ask the 12 daughters of Yaga in marriage. If she is willing to be our mother-in-law, let her open the door." The door was opened, and Yaga appeared. She was a frightful-looking creature, old as the hills, and being one of those monsters who feed on human flesh, the unfortunate wretches who once entered her house never came out again. She had a lame leg, and because of this she leaned on a great iron crutch, and when she went out removed all traces of her steps with a broom. She received the young travelers very graciously, shut the gate of the courtyard behind them, and led them into the house. Niisgwinek's brothers dismounted, and taking their horses to the stables, tied them up to rings made of silver. The youngest fastened his to a copper ring. The old witch served her guests with a good supper, and gave them wine and hydromel to drink. Then she made up 12 beds on the right side of the room for the travelers, and on the left side 12 beds for her daughters. All were soon asleep except Niisginek. He had been warned beforehand by his horse of the danger that threatened them, and now he got up quietly and changed the positions of the 24 beds, so that the brothers lay to the left side of the room, and Yaga's daughters to the right. At midnight, old Yaga cried out in a hoarse voice, "Guzla, play, sword, strike." Then were heard strains of sweet music, to which the old woman beat time from her oaken trough. At the same moment a slender sword descended into the room, and passing over to the beds on the right, cut off the heads of the girls one by one, after which it danced about and flashed in the darkness. When the dawn broke, the guzla ceased playing, the sword disappeared, and silence reigned. Then Niisginek softly aroused his brothers, and they all went out without making any noise. Each mounted his horse, and when they had broken open the yard gate, they made their escape at full speed. Old Yaga, thinking she heard footsteps, got up and ran into the room where her daughters lay dead. At the dreadful sight she gnashed her teeth, barked like a dog, tore out her hair by handfuls, and seating herself in her trough as in a car, set off after the fugitives. She had nearly reached them, and was already stretching out her hand to seize them, when Niisginek unrolled his magic scarf, and instantly a deep river flowed between her and the horsemen. Not being able to cross it, she stopped on the banks and, howling savagely, began to drink it up. "Before you have swallowed all that river you will burst, you wicked old witch," cried Niisginek. Then he rejoined his brothers, but the old woman drank all the water, crossed the bed of the river in her trough, and soon came near the young people. Niisginek shook his handkerchief, and a lake immediately spread out between them, so she was again obliged to stop, and shrieking with rage began to drink up the water. "Before you have drunk that lake dry you will have burst yourself," said Niisginek, and rode after his brothers. The old vixen drank up part of the water, and turning the remainder into a thick fog, hastened along in her trough. She was once more close upon the young men, when Niisginek, without a moment's delay, seized his brush, and as he waved it in the air, a thick forest rose between them. For a time the witch was at a loss to know what to do. On one side she saw Niezginek and his brothers rapidly disappearing, while she stood on the other, hindered by the branches and torn by the thorns of the thick bushes, unable either to advance or retreat. Foaming with rage, with fire flashing from her eyes, she struck right and left with her crutches, crashing trees on all sides. But before she could clear away, those she was in pursuit of had got more than 100 miles ahead. So she was forced to give up, and grinding her teeth, howling and tearing out her hair, she threw after the fugitives such flaming glances from her eyes that she set the forest on fire, and taking the road home was soon lost to sight. The travelers, seeing the flames, guessed what had happened, and thanked God for having preserved them from such great dangers. They continued their journey, and by eventide arrived at the top of a steep hill. There they saw a town besieged by foreign troops, who had already destroyed the outer part, and only awaited daylight to take it by storm. The 12 brothers kept out of sight behind the enemy, and when they had rested and turned out their horses to graze, all went to sleep except Niezginek, who kept watch without closing an eye. When everything was perfectly still, he got up, and calling his horse, said, "Listen, yonder in that tent sleeps the king of this besieging army, and he dreams of the victory he hopes for on the morrow. How could we send all the soldiers to sleep and get possession of his person?" The horse replied, "You will find some dried leaves of the herb of sleep in the pocket of the saddle. Mount upon my back and hover round the camp, spreading fragments of the plant. That will cause all the soldiers to fall into a sound sleep, after which you can carry out your plans." Niezginek mounted his horse, pronouncing these magic words: "Marvel of strength and of beauty so white, horse of my heart, let us go. Rise in the air, like a bird take thy flight, haste to the camp of the foe." The horse glanced upwards as if he saw someone beckoning to him from the clouds, then rose rapidly as a bird on the wing and hovered over the camp. Niezginek took handfuls of the herb of sleep from the saddle pockets and sprinkled it all about, upon which all in the camp, including the sentinels, fell at once into a heavy sleep. Niezginek alighted, entered the tent, and carried off the sleeping king without any difficulty. He then returned to his brothers, unharnessed his horse, and lay down to rest, placing the royal prisoner near him. His Majesty slept on as if nothing unusual had taken place. At daybreak the soldiers of the besieging army awoke, and not being able to find their king, were seized with such a panic of terror that they retreated in great disorder. The ruler of the besieged city would not at first believe that the enemy had really disappeared, and indeed went himself to see if it was true. Of a truth there remained nothing of the enemy's camp but a few deserted tents whitening on the plain. At that moment Niezginek came up with his brothers and said, "Sire, the enemy has fled, and we were unable to detain them. But here is their king whom we have made prisoner, and whom I deliver up to you." The ruler replied, "I see indeed that you are a brave man among brave men, and I will reward you. This royal prisoner is worth a large ransom to me. So speak. What would you like me to do for you?" "I should wish, sire, that my brothers and I might enter the service of your Majesty." "I am quite willing," answered the king. Then, having placed his prisoner in charge of his guards, he made Niezginek general and placed him at the head of a division of his army. The 11 brothers were given the rank of officers. when Nizguinek appeared in uniform, and with saber in hand mounted his splendid charger. He looked so handsome and conducted the maneuvers so well that he surpassed all the other chiefs in the country, thus causing much jealousy even among his own brothers, for they were vexed that the youngest should outshine them, and so determined to ruin him. In order to accomplish this, they imitated his handwriting, and placed such a note before the king's door while Nizhgnek was engaged elsewhere. When the king went out, he found the letter, and calling Nizhgnek to him, said, "I should very much like to have the phonic ghazla you mention in your letter." "But, sire, I have not written anything about a ghazla," said he. "Read the note, then. Is it not in your handwriting?" Nizhgnek read, "In a certain country within the house of old Yaga is a marvelous ghazla. If the king wish, I will fetch it for him. Signed, Nizhgnek." "It is true," said he, "that this writing resembles mine, but it is a forgery, for I never wrote it." "Never mind," said the king. "As you were able to take my enemy prisoner, you will certainly be able to succeed in getting old Yaga's ghazla. Go then, and do not return without it, or you will be executed." Nizhgnek bowed and went out. He went straight to the stable, where he found his charger looking very sad and thin, his head drooping before the trough, the hay untouched. "What is the matter with you, my good steed? What grieves you?" "I grieve for us both, for I foresee a long and perilous journey." "You are right, old fellow, but we have to go. And what is more, we have to take away and bring here old Yaga's ghazla. And how shall we do it, seeing that she knows us?" "We shall certainly succeed if you do as I tell you." Then the horse gave him certain instructions, and when Nizhgnek had led him out of the stable and mounted, he said, "Marvel of strength and of beauty so white, horse of my heart, do not wait on the road. Rise in the air, like a bird take thy flight, haste to the wicked old Yaga's abode." The horse arose in the air as if he heard someone calling to him from the clouds, and flitting rapidly along, passed over several kingdoms within a few hours, thus reaching old Yaga's dwelling before midnight. Nizhgnek threw the leaves of sleep in at the window, and by means of another wonderful herb caused all the doors of the house to open. On entering, he found old Yaga fast asleep, with her trough and iron crutches beside her, while above her head hung the magic sword and ghazla. While the old witch lay snoring with all her might, Nizhgnek took the ghazla and leapt on his horse, crying, "Marvel of strength and of beauty so white, horse of my heart, while I sing, rise in the air like a bird take thy flight, haste to the court of my king." Just as if the horse had seen something in the clouds, he rose swift as an arrow and flew through the air above the fogs. The same day about noon he neighed before his own manger in the royal stable, and Nizhgnek went into the king and presented him with the ghazla. On pronouncing the two words, "Ghazla, play," strains of music so gay and inspiriting were heard that all the courtiers began dancing with one another. The sick who listened were cured of their diseases, those who were in trouble and grief forgot their sorrows, and all living creatures were thrilled with a gladness such as they had never felt before. The king was beside himself with joy. He loaded Nizhgnek with honors and presents, and in order to have him always at court, raised him to a higher rank in the army. In this new post he had many under him, and he showed much exactitude in drill and other matters, punishing somewhat severely when necessary. He made, too, no difference in the treatment of his brothers, which angered them greatly and caused them to be still more jealous and to plot against him. So they again imitated his handwriting and composed another letter, which they left at the king's door. When his majesty had read it, he called Nizguinek to him and said, "I should much like to have the marvelous sword you speak of in your letter." "Sire, I have not written anything about a sword," said Nizguinek. "Well, read it for yourself." And he read, "In a certain country within the house of old Yaga is a sword that strikes of its own accord. If the king would like to have it, I will engage to bring it him. Signed, Nizguinek." "Certainly," said Nizguinek. "This writing resembles mine, but I never wrote those words." "Never mind, as you succeeded in bringing me the guzla, you will find no difficulty in obtaining the sword. Start without delay, and do not return without it at your peril." Nizguinek bowed and went to the stable, where he found his horse looking very thin and miserable, with his head drooping. "What is the matter, my horse? Do you want anything?" "I am unhappy because I foresee a long and dangerous journey." "You are right, for we are ordered to return to Yaga's house for the sword. But how can we get hold of it? Doubtless she guards it as the apple of her eye." The horse answered, "Do as I tell you, and all will be right." And he gave him certain instructions. Nizguinek came out of the stable, saddled his friend, and mounting him said, "Marvel of strength and of beauty so white. Horse of my heart, do not wait on the road. Rise in the air, like a bird take thy flight. Haste to the wicked old witch's abode." The horse rose immediately as if he had been beckoned to by someone in the clouds, and passing swiftly through the air, crossed rivers and mountains, till at midnight he stopped before old Yaga's house. Since the disappearance of the guzla, the sword had been placed on guard before the house, and whoever came near it was cut to pieces. Nizguinek traced a circle with holy chalk, and placing himself on horseback in the center of it, said, "Sword, who of thyself can smite? I come to brave thy ire. Peace or war upon this sight of thee I do require. If thou canst conquer, thine my life. Should I beat thee, then ends this strife." The sword clinked, leapt into the air, and fell to the ground divided into 1,000 other swords, which ranged themselves in battle array and began to attack Nizguinek. But in vain. They were powerless to touch him, for on reaching the chalk-traced circle they broke like wisps of straw. Then the sword-in-chief, seeing how useless it was to go on trying to wound him, submitted itself to Nizguinek and promised him obedience. Taking the magic weapon in his hand, he mounted his horse and said, "Marvel of strength and of beauty so white. Horse of my heart, while I sing, rise in the air like a bird take thy flight, back to the court of my king." The horse started with renewed courage, and by noon was eating his hay in the royal stables. Nizguinek went into the king and presented him with the sword. While he was rejoicing over it, one of his servants rushed in quite out of breath and said, "Sire, your enemies who attacked us last year, and whose king is your prisoner, surround our town. Being unable to redeem their sovereign, they have come with an immense army and threaten to destroy us if their king is not released without ransom." The king armed himself with the magic sword, and going outside the city walls, said to it, as he pointed to the enemy's camp, "Magic sword, smite the foe." Immediately the sword clinked, leapt flashing in the air, and fell in 1,000 blades that threw themselves on the camp. One regiment was destroyed during the first attack, another was defeated in the same way, while the rest of the terrified soldiers fled and completely disappeared. Then the king said, "Sword, return to me." The 1,000 swords again became one, and so it returned to its master's hand. The victorious king came home filled with joy. He called Nizhgnek to him, loaded him with gifts, and assuring him of his favor, made him the highest general of his forces. In carrying out the duties of this new post, Nizhgnek was often obliged to punish his brothers, who became more and more enraged against him, and took counsel together how they might bring about his downfall. One day the king found a letter by his door, and after reading it he called Nizhgnek to him and said, "I should very much like to see Princess Sudolisu, whom you wish to bring me. Sire, I do not know the lady and have never spoken to her. Here, look at your letter." Nizhgnek read, "Beyond the 9 kingdoms, far beyond the ocean, within a silver vessel with golden masts lives Princess Sudolisu. If the king wishes it, I will seek her for him. Signed, Nizhgnek." It is true the writing is like unto mine. Nevertheless, I neither composed the letter nor wrote it. "No matter," answered the king. "You will be able to get this princess as you did the guzla and the sword. If not, I will have you killed." Nizhgnek bowed and went out. He entered the stable where stood his horse, looking very weak and sad, with his head bent down. "What is the matter, dear horse? Are you in want of anything?" "I am sorrowful," answered the horse, "because I foresee a long and difficult journey." "You are right, for we have to go beyond the 9 kingdoms and far beyond the ocean to find Princess Sudolisu. Can you tell me what to do?" "I will do my best, and if it is God's will we shall succeed. Bring your club of 480 pounds weight, and let us be off." Nizhgnek saddled his horse, took his club, and mounting said, "Marvel of strength and of beauty so white, horse of my heart, do not lag on the road. Rise in the air, through the clouds take thy flight. Haste to Princess Sudolisu's abode." Then the horse looked up as if there were something he wanted in the clouds, and with a spring flew through the air, swift as an arrow. And so by the 2nd day they had passed over 10 kingdoms, and finding themselves beyond the ocean, halted on the shore. Here the horse said to Nizhgnek, "Do you see that silver ship with golden masts that rides on the waves yonder? That beautiful vessel is the home of Princess Sudolisu, youngest daughter of old Yaga. For after the witch had lost the guzla and magic sword, she feared to lose her daughter too. So she shut her up in that vessel, and having thrown the key thereof into the ocean, sat herself in her oaken trough, where with the help of the iron crutches she rows round and round the silver ship, warding off tempests and keeping at a distance all other ships that would approach it. The first thing to be done is to get the diamond key that opens the ship. In order to procure this you must kill me, and then throw into the water one end of my entrails, by which bait you will trap the king of the lobsters. Do not set him free until he has promised to get you the key, for it is this key that draws the vessel to you of its own accord." "Ah, my beloved steed," cried Nizhgnek, "how can I kill you when I love you as my own brother, and when my fate depends upon you entirely, do as I tell you. You can bring me to life again as you did before." Nizhgynnek caressed his horse, kissed him and wept over him, then raising his mighty club struck him full on the forehead. The poor creature staggered and fell down dead. Nizhgynnek cut him open, and putting an end of his entrails in the water, he kept hold of it and hid himself in the water rushes. Soon there came a crowd of crawfish, and amongst them a gigantic lobster as large as a year-old calf. Nizhgynnek seized him and threw him on the beach. The lobster said, "I am king of all the crawfish tribe. Let me go, and I will give you great riches for my ransom." "I do not want your riches," answered Nizhgynnek, "but in exchange for your freedom give me the diamond key which belongs to the silver ship with the golden masts, for in that vessel dwells Princess Sudolisu." The king of the crawfish whistled, upon which myriads of his subjects appeared. He spoke to them in their own language and dismissed one, who soon returned with the magic diamond key in his claws. Nizhgynnek loosed the king of the crawfish, and hiding himself inside his horse's body as he had been instructed, lay in wait. At that moment an old raven, followed by all his nestlings, happened to pass, and attracted by the horse's carcass, he called to his young ones to come and feast with him. Nizhgynnek seized the smallest of the birds and held it firmly. "Let my birdling go," said the old raven. "I will give you in return anything you like to ask." "Fetch me then 3 kinds of water, the life-giving, the curing, and the strengthening." The old raven started off, and while awaiting his return, Nizhgynnek, who still held the ravenling, questioned him as to where he had come from and what he had seen on his travels, and in this way heard news of his brothers. When the father bird returned, carrying with him the bottles filled with the marvelous waters, he wanted to have his nestling back. "One moment more," said Nizhgynnek. "I want to be sure that they are of the right sort." Then he replaced the entrails in the body of his horse and sprinkled him first with the life-giving, then with the curing, and finally with the strengthening water, after which his beloved steed leapt to his feet full of strength and cried, "Ah, how very soundly I have slept." Nizhgynnek released the young raven and said to his horse, "For sure you would have slept to all eternity, and have never seen the sun again, if I had not revived you as you taught me." While speaking, he saw the marvelous ship sparkling white in the sun. She was made entirely of pure silver, with golden masts. The rigging was of silk, the sails of velvet, and the whole was enclosed in a casing of impenetrable steel network. Nizhgynnek sprang down to the water's edge armed with his club, and rubbing his forehead with the diamond key, said, "Riding on the ocean waves a magic ship I see. Stop and change thy course, O ship. Here I hold the key. Obey the signal known to thee, and come at once direct to me." The vessel turned right round and came at full speed towards land, and right onto the bank, where it remained motionless. Nizhgynnek smashed in the steel network with his club, and opening the doors with the diamond key, there found Princess Sudolisu. He made her unconscious with the herb sleep, and lifting her before him on his horse, said, "Marvel of strength and of beauty so white, horse of my heart, while I sing, swift as an arrow through space, take thy flight straight to the court of my king." Then the horse, as if he saw some strange thing in the clouds, lifted himself in the air and began to fly through space so rapidly that in about 2 hours he had crossed rivers, mountains, and forests, and had reached his journey's end. Although Nizhgnek had fallen violently in love with the princess himself, he took her straight to the royal palace and introduced her to the king. Now she was so exquisitely beautiful that the monarch was quite dazzled by looking at her, and being thus carried away by his admiration, he put his arm round her as if to caress her. But she rebuked him severely. "What have I done to offend you, princess? Why do you treat me so harshly?" "Because in spite of your rank you are ill-bred. You neither ask my name nor that of my parents, and you think to take possession of me as if I were but a dog or a falcon. You must understand that he who would be my husband must have triple youth, that of heart, soul, and body." "Charming princess, if I could become young again, we would be married directly," she replied. "But I have the means of making you so, and by help of this sword in my hand. For with it I will pierce you to the heart, then cut up your body into small pieces, wash them carefully, and join them together again. And if I breathe upon them, you will return to life young and handsome, just as if you were only 20 years of age." "Oh, indeed. I should like to know who would submit to that. First make trial of Sir Nizhgnek here." The princess looked at him, whereupon he bowed and said, "Lovely princess, I willingly submit, although I am young enough without it. In any case, life without you would be valueless." Then the princess took a step towards him and killed him with her sword. She cut him up in pieces and washed these in pure water, after which she joined them together again and breathed upon them. Instantly Nizhgnek sprang up full of life and health, and looked so handsome and bright that the old king, who was dreadfully jealous, exclaimed, "Make me too young again, princess. Do not lose a moment." The princess pierced him to the heart with her sword, cut him up into little pieces, and opening the window threw them out, at the same time calling the king's dogs, who quickly ate them up. Then she turned to Nizhgnek and said, "Proclaim yourself king, and I will be your queen." He followed her advice, and within a short time they were married, his brothers, whom he had pardoned, and his parents having been invited to the wedding. On their way back from the church, the magic sword suddenly clinked, and flashing in the air divided itself into 1,000 swords that placed themselves on guard as sentinels all round the palace. The guzla, too, began to play so sweetly and gaily that every living thing began to dance for joy. The festival was magnificent. I myself was there and drank freely of wine and mead, and although not a drop went into my mouth, my chin was quite wet. "13 at table." In front of a spacious fireplace of the old kind, when the logs were well alight, and men with pipes and glasses were gathered before it in great easeful chairs, and the wild weather outside and the comfort that was within, and the season of the year, for it was Christmas, and the hour of the night, all called for the weird or uncanny, then out spoke the ex-master of foxhounds and told this tale. I once had an odd experience, too. It was when I had the Bromley and Sydenham, the year I gave them up. As a matter of fact, it was the last day of the season. It was no use going on because there were no foxes left in the county, and London was sweeping down on us. You could see it from the kennels all along the skyline like a terrible army in gray, and masses of villas every year came skirmishing down our valleys. Our coverts were mostly on the hills, and as the town came down upon the valleys, the foxes used to leave them and go right away out of the county, and they never returned. I think they went by night and moved great distances. Well, it was early April, and we had drawn blank all day, and at the last draw of all, the very last of the season, we found a fox. He left the covert with his back to London and its railways and villas and wire, and slipped away towards the chalk country and open Kent. I felt as I once felt as a child on one summer's day when I found a door in a garden where I played left luckily ajar, and I pushed it open, and the wide lands were before me and waving fields of corn. We settled down into a steady gallop, and the fields began to drift by under us, and a great wind arose full of fresh breath. We left the clay lands where the bracken grows and came to a valley at the edge of the chalk. As we went down into it, we saw the fox go up the other side like a shadow that crosses the evening and glide into a wood that stood on the top. We saw a flash of primroses in the wood, and we were out the other side, hounds hunting perfectly and the fox still going absolutely straight. It began to dawn on me then that we were in for a great hunt. I took a deep breath when I thought of it. The taste of the air of that perfect spring afternoon as it came to one galloping, and the thought of a great run, were together like some old rare wine. Our faces now were to another valley. Large fields led down to it, with easy hedges. At the bottom of it a bright blue stream went singing, and a rambling village smoked. The sunlight on the opposite slopes danced like a fairy, and all along the top old woods were frowning, but they dreamed of spring. The field had fallen of and were far behind, and my only human companion was James, my old first whip, who had a hound's instinct and a personal animosity against a fox that even embittered his speech. Across the valley the fox went as straight as a railway line, and again we went without a check straight through the woods at the top. I remember hearing men sing or shout as they walked home from work, and sometimes children whistled. The sounds came up from the village to the woods at the top of the valley. After that we saw no more villages, but valley after valley arose and fell before us as though we were voyaging some strange and stormy sea. And all the way before us the fox went dead upwind like the fabulous Flying Dutchman. There was no one in sight now but my first whip and me. We had both of us got on to our second horses as we drew the last covert dot. 2 or 3 times we checked in those great lonely valleys beyond the village, but I began to have inspirations. I felt a strange certainty within me that this fox was going on straight upwind till he died, or until night came and we could hunt no longer. So I reversed ordinary methods, and only cast straight ahead, and always we picked up the scent again at once. I believe that this fox was the last one left in the villa-haunted lands, and that he was prepared to leave them for remote uplands far from men. that if we had come the following day he would not have been there, and that we just happened to hit off his journey. Evening began to descend upon the valleys. Still the hounds drifted on, like the lazy but unresting shadows of clouds upon a summer's day. We heard a shepherd calling to his dog. We saw two maidens move towards a hidden farm, one of them singing softly. No other sounds but ours disturbed the leisure and the loneliness of haunts that seemed not yet to have known the inventions of steam and gunpowder. Even as China, they say, in some of her further mountains, does not yet know that she has fought Japan. And now the day and our horses were wearing out, but that resolute fox held on. I began to work out the run and to wonder where we were. The last landmark I had ever seen before must have been over 5 miles back, and from there to the start was at least 10 miles more. If only we could kill. Then the sun set. I wondered what chance we had of killing our fox. I looked at James's face as he rode beside me. He did not seem to have lost any confidence, yet his horse was as tired as mine. It was a good clear twilight, and the scent was as strong as ever, and the fences were easy enough. But those valleys were terribly trying, and they still rolled on and on. It looked as if the light would outlast all possible endurance, both of the fox and the horses. If the scent held good and he did not go to ground, otherwise night would end it. For long we had seen no houses and no roads, only chalk slopes with the twilight on them, and here and there some sheep and scattered copses darkening in the evening. At some moment I seemed to realize all at once that the light was spent and that darkness was hovering. I looked at James. He was solemnly shaking his head. Suddenly, in a little wooded valley, we saw climb over the oaks the red-brown gables of a queer old house. At that instant I saw the fox scarcely heading by 50 yards. We blundered through a wood into full sight of the house, but no avenue led up to it or even a path, nor were there any signs of wheel marks anywhere. Already lights shone here and there in windows. We were in a park, and a fine park, but unkempt beyond credibility. Brambles grew everywhere. It was too dark to see the fox anymore, but we knew he was dead beat. The hounds were just before us, and a 4-foot railing of oak. I shouldn't have tried it on a fresh horse the beginning of a run, and here was a horse near his last gasp. But what a run! An event standing out in a lifetime, and the hounds close up on their fox, slipping into the darkness as I hesitated. I decided to try it. My horse rose about 8 inches and took it fair with his breast, and the oak log flew into handfuls of wet decay, it rotten with years. And then we were on a lawn, and at the far end of it the hounds were tumbling over their fox. Fox, hounds, and light were all done together at the of a 20-mile point. We made some noise then, but nobody came out of the queer old house. I felt pretty stiff as I walked round to the hall door with the mask and the brush, while James went with the hounds and the 2 horses to look for the stables. I rang a bell marvelously encrusted with rust, and after a long while the door opened, a little way revealing a hall with much old armor in it, and the shabbiest butler that I have ever known. I asked him who lived there. Sir Richard Arlen. I explained that my horse could go no further that night, and that I wished to ask Sir Richard Arlen for a bed for the night. "Oh, no one ever comes here, sir," said the butler. I pointed out that I had come. "I don't think it would be possible, sir," he said. This annoyed me, and I asked to see Sir Richard, and insisted until he came. Then I apologized and explained the situation. He looked only 50, but a varsity oar on the wall with the date of the early 70s made him older than that. His face had something of the shy look of the hermit. He regretted that he had not room to put me up. I was sure that this was untrue. Also, I had to be put up there. There was nowhere else within miles, so I almost insisted. Then, to my astonishment, he turned to the butler and they talked it over in an undertone. At last they seemed to think that they could manage it, though clearly with reluctance. It was by now 7 o'clock, and Sir Richard told me he dined at 7:30. There was no question of clothes for me other than those I stood in, as my host was shorter and broader. He showed me presently to the drawing-room, and there he reappeared before 7:30 in evening dress and a white waistcoat. The drawing-room was large and contained old furniture, but it was rather worn than venerable. An Aubusson carpet flapped about the floor. The wind seemed momently to enter the room, and old draughts haunted corners. The stealthy feet of rats that were never at rest indicated the extent of the ruin that time had wrought in the wainscot. Somewhere far off a shutter flapped to and fro. The guttering candles were insufficient to light so large a room. The gloom that these things suggested was quite in keeping with Sir Richard's first remark to me after he entered the room. "I must tell you, sir, that I have led a wicked life. Oh, a very wicked life." Such confidences from a man much older than oneself after one has known him for half an hour are so rare that any possible answer merely does not suggest itself. I said rather slowly, "Oh, really?" And chiefly to forestall another such remark, I said, "What a charming house you have." "Yes," he said. "I have not left it for nearly 40 years. Since I left the varsity. One is young there, you know, and one has opportunities, but I make no excuses. No excuses." And the door, slipping its rusty latch, came drifting on the draught into the room, and the long carpet flapped, and the hangings upon the walls. Then the draught fell rustling away, and the door slammed to again. "Ah, Marianne," he said, "we have a guest tonight. Mr. Linton, this is Marianne Gibb." And everything became clear to me. Mad, I said to myself, for no one had entered the room. The rats ran up the length of the room behind the wainscot ceaselessly, and the wind unlatched the door again, and the folds of the carpet fluttered up to our feet and stopped there, for our weight held it down. "Let me introduce Mr. Linton," said my host. "Lady Mary Erringer." The door slammed back again. I bowed politely. Even had I been invited, I should have humored him. But it was the very least that an uninvited guest could do. This kind of thing happened 11 times. The rustling and the fluttering of the carpet and the footsteps of the rats and the restless door, and then the sad voice of my host introducing me to phantoms. Then, for some while we waited while I struggled with the situation. Conversation flowed slowly, and again the draft came trailing up the room, while the flaring candles filled it with hurrying shadows. "Ah, late again, Cicely," said my host in his soft, mournful way. "Always late, Cicely." Then I went down to dinner with that man and his mind and the 12 phantoms that haunted it. I found a long table with fine old silver on it and places laid for 14. The butler was now in evening dress. There were fewer draughts in the dining room. The scene was less gloomy there. "Will you sit next to Rosalind at the other end?" Richard said to me. "She always takes the head of the table. I wronged her most of all." I said, "I shall be delighted." I looked at the butler closely, but never did I see by any expression of his face, or by anything that he did any suggestion that he waited upon less than 14 people in the complete possession of all their faculties. Perhaps a dish appeared to be refused more often than taken, but every glass was equally filled with champagne. At first I found little to say, but when Sir Richard, speaking from the far end of the table, said, "You are tired, Mr. Linton," I was reminded that I owed something to a host upon whom I had forced myself. It was excellent champagne, and with the help of a second glass, I made the effort to begin a conversation with a Miss Helen Errold, for whom the place upon one side of me was laid. It came more easy to me very soon. I frequently paused in my monologue, like Mark Antony, for a reply, and sometimes I turned and spoke to Miss Rosalind Smith. Sir Richard, at the other end, talked sorrowfully on. He spoke as a condemned man might speak to his judge, and yet somewhat as a judge might speak to one that he once condemned wrongly. My own mind began to turn to mournful things. I drank another glass of champagne, but I was still thirsty. I felt as if all the moisture in my body had been blown away over the downs of Kent by the wind up which we had galloped. Still, I was not talking enough. My host was looking at me. I made another effort. After all, I had something to talk about. A 20-mile point is not often seen in a lifetime, especially south of the Thames. I began to describe the run to Rosalind Smith. I could see then that my host was pleased. The sad look in his face gave a kind of a flicker, like mist upon the mountains on a miserable day when a faint puff comes from the sea, and the mist would lift if it could. And the butler refilled my glass very attentively. I asked her first if she hunted, and paused and began my story. I told her where we had found the fox, and how fast and straight he had gone, and how I had got through the village by keeping to the road, while the little gardens and wire, and then the river had stopped the rest of the field. I told her the kind of country that we crossed, and how splendid it looked in the spring, and how mysterious the valleys were as soon as the twilight came, and what a glorious horse I had, and how wonderfully he went. I was so fearfully thirsty after the great hunt that I had to stop for a moment now and then, but I went on with my description of that famous run, for I had warmed to the subject, and after all there was nobody to tell of it but me except my old whipper-in, and the old fellow's probably drunk by now, I thought. I described to her minutely the exact spot in the run at which it had come to me clearly that this was going to be the greatest hunt in the whole history of Kent. Sometimes I forgot incidents that had happened as one well may in a run of 20 miles, and then I had to fill in the gaps by inventing. I was pleased to be able to make the party go off well by means of my conversation. And besides that, the lady to whom I was speaking was extremely pretty. I do not mean in a flesh and blood kind of way, but there were little shadowy lines about the chair beside me that hinted at an unusually graceful figure when Miss Rosalind Smith was alive. And I began to perceive that what I first mistook for the smoke of guttering candles and a tablecloth waving in the draught was in reality an extremely animated company who listened, and not without interest, Tommy's story of by far the greatest hunt that the world had ever known. Indeed, I told them that I would confidently go further and predict that never in the history of the world would there be such a run again. Only my throat was terribly dry. And then, as it seemed, they wanted to hear more about my horse. I had forgotten that I had come there on a horse. But when they reminded me, it all came back. They looked so charming, leaning over the table, intent upon what I said, that I told them everything they wanted to know. Everything was going so pleasantly if only Sir Richard would cheer up. I heard his mournful voice every now and then. These were very pleasant people, if only he would take them the right way. I could understand that he regretted his past, but the early 70s seemed centuries away, and I felt sure that he misunderstood these ladies. They were not revengeful as he seemed to suppose. I wanted to show him how cheerful they really were, and so I made a joke and they laughed at it, and then I chaffed them a bit, especially Rosalind, and nobody resented it in the very least. And still Sir Richard sat there with that unhappy look, like one that has ended weeping because it is vain and has not the consolation even of tears. We had been a long time there, and many of the candles had burned out, but there was light enough. I was glad to have an audience for my exploit, and being happy myself, I was determined Sir Richard should be. I made more jokes, and they still laughed good-naturedly. Some of the jokes were a little broad, perhaps, but no harm was meant. And then, I do not wish to excuse myself, but I had had a harder day than I ever had had before, and without knowing it, I must have been completely exhausted. In this state, the champagne had found me, and what would have been harmless at any other time must somehow have got the better of me when quite tired out. Anyhow, I went too far. I made some joke. I cannot in the least remember what, that suddenly seemed to offend them. I felt all at once a commotion in the air. I looked up and saw that they had all arisen from the table and were sweeping towards the door. I had not time to open it, but it blew open on a wind. I could scarcely see what Sir Richard was doing because only 2 candles were left. I think the rest blew out when the ladies suddenly rose. I sprang up to apologize, to assure them, and then fatigue overcame me as it had overcome my horse at the last fence. I clutched at the table, but the cloth came away, and then I fell. The fall, and the darkness on the floor, and the pent-up fatigue of the day overcame me all three together. The sun shone over glittering fields, and in at a bedroom window, and thousands of birds were chanting to the spring. And there I was in an old four-poster bed in a quaint old paneled bedroom, fully dressed and wearing long muddy boots. Someone had taken my spurs, and that was all. For a moment I failed to realize, and then it all came back. My enormity and the pressing need of an abject apology to Sir Richard. I pulled an embroidered bell rope until the butler came. He came in perfectly cheerful and indescribably shabby. I asked him if Sir Richard was up, and he said he had just gone down, and told me to my amazement that it was 12 o'clock. I asked to be shown in to Sir Richard at once. He was in his smoking room. "Good morning," he said cheerfully the moment I went in. I went directly to the matter in hand. "I fear that I insulted some ladies in your house," I began. "You did indeed," he said. "You did indeed." And then he burst into tears and took me by the hand. "How can I ever thank you?" he said to me then. "We have been 13 at table for 30 years, and I never dared to insult them because I had wronged them all. And now you have done it, and I know they will never dine here again." And for a long time he still held my hand. And then he gave it a grip and a kind of a shake, which I took to mean goodbye. And I drew my hand away then and left the house. And I found James in the stables with the hounds, and asked him how he had fared. And James, who was a man of very few words, said he could not rightly remember, and I got my spurs from the butler and climbed onto my horse, and slowly we rode away from that queer old house, and slowly we wended home, for the hounds were footsore but happy, and the horses were tired still. And when we recalled that the hunting season was ended, we turned our faces to spring and thought of the new things that try to replace the old. And that very year I heard, and have often heard since, of dances and happier dinners at Sir Richard Arlen's house.